now that we've warmed up, I'd like to actually start by watching a video and then seeing what questions are unanswered. So I'm going to play a short video for us now. I'm Jacob Niedzwiecki, and I'm a creative technologist. I grew up backstage. My first career was as a ballet dancer and choreographer. I've been coding since I was 7, and over the last couple years, I created apps in collaboration with some really interesting theater and dance artists. Cohort is a way to take the capabilities we've created together and make them available to more creators. The Cohort development team is made up of myself, Luke Garwood, Amanda Baker, and Nabil Kassam. So what can you do with Cohort? You can load sound, video, and images into a custom app. You can borrow devices from us and load that app onto them for your show. Or you can use your own devices. Or you can submit it to the App Store and have your audience download it. You can trigger playback of sound and video on cue, either from our admin website on a laptop or phone, or directly from QLab. You can also cue text to appear and trigger device vibrations. What can you do with this? Well, we can have a quick look at what some of our partner companies have done. It's Not a Box Theater used Cohort to create a documentary theater piece called Over Here, where storytellers share their stories. Bluemouth Inc. used Cohort to enhance their theater piece Cafe Sarajevo, using 3D 360 video to immerse audiences in the Balkans. Used Cohort to guide participants of all abilities and let them feel what it's like to invent and enjoy movement together. There's also a few capabilities that have been used by our partner companies but aren't quite. Adelheid Dance Projects used push notifications and text cues to guide audiences around a huge indoor-outdoor site in their work Lot X, to create a log installation, and to offer closed captioning for deaf and hard-of-hearing audience members. And I used Cohort in my work Jackeries to cue augmented reality scenes that overtook some video onto a live performer. And free for anyone to use. In addition to production uses in theaters and in site-specific works, it's really helpful for quickly testing out apps. If you're interested in learning more, you can check out cohort.rocks or email us at cohortrocks@gmail.com. Thanks to our partner companies, to the Canada Council for the Arts Digital Strategy Fund, and to Heidi Strauss and Rachel Penny at Adelheid for making this all possible. All right, and it looks like I stopped that share just in time for autoplay not to show the last time I was on stage as a dancer. So I would imagine that that will leave some questions, but hopefully that gives a small sense of what we're up to and what we're doing. And in a way that means I don't have to then spend a bunch of time talking about it. I would like to ask, are there questions? Does anybody have a question or curiosity or any observations from watching that video? To Erica.
Hey, yeah, I was just wondering if it's an open source platform, like this, how Cohort is shared.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and gives me a perfect chance to so literally on my notes here, I have a little note that says, what it's not, a platform. However, it is open source, and that means that that means a couple things. One is that the easiest way to think about that for people involved in theater and the arts is that we give up copyright. So when developers work, like when I as a developer write code for Cohort, I relinquish the copyright to that code. And so on a surface level, that's quite common among developers and coders, because we have a perspective that code is often not valuable. Code does not appreciate in value. Code tends to be something more like a boat that requires a lot of maintenance over time to stay useful. So open source is sometimes it gets used as a way to share code, but other times it gets used as a way to say, I don't plan to maintain this anymore and I'm done with it, so I'm might as well let people have at it and, you know, use the bits that are useful. Um, so open source, I would say, inspired how we work, but also we're trying to go a fair bit beyond it, in the sense that something being open source does not make it usable. And our mission is really to make it easier for artists and producers and creators to integrate smartphones as another tool, storytelling, for creating audience experiences. So our funding from the Digital Strategy Fund, a lot of our goals with that are around bringing people into it in a way that allows artists to pick it up and use it and make it useful, in as short an order as possible. So when I say what it's not a platform. To me, a platform has a grandiosity to it. There's a platform contains and holds things, and it is not our position that a theater company should be beholden to a technology provider in that way. It's very important to us that, you know, like, we are individual artists, we have our own practices, and so when we collaborate with theater makers or with dance makers, our goal is to really make sure that they keep ownership of the work that they do and the material that they create. So there's a way of looking at Cohort, which is by subtraction. If I think about a dance show, the material that is specific to that in-theater dance show is movement, is music, a lighting design, possibly a set design, costume design. None of those things cross over between Cohort productions. All we're trying to provide is something like a lighting board. We're trying to provide a tool and to improve it over time and to make it usable by the wider community. So we're also not a startup. We have no, you know, venture capital funding. We are not in the middle of trying to turn our digital strategy project into a company. So that takes us out of a competitive space. And so those are the three things that are on my sort of what we're not doing. We're building a toolkit, not a platform. We're building a kind of rhizomatic network rather than a startup, and we're in a non-competitive. We see ourselves in a non-competitive role. So the first thing I will say is, if there is a way to get an idea you have done that can be done more easily than using Cohort's tools, tell us, and we will tell other people. Like, we will not only support that, but we will you know, broadcast that. So you will see me check my watch continually because I lose track of time very easily. I think, yeah, okay. So we've talked about what it's not. What is it? It's a collaborative model. The idea that we came in with was that it's expensive and difficult to build custom technology for a show. So why do we see companies duplicating that work? Wouldn't it be lovely if we could actually build on top of where each other get to? There's a quote from Steve Jobs, and he's talking about something called APIs. Put up your hand if you don't know what API means. Okay, so an API is an application programming interface, which tells you nothing. That tells you absolutely nothing. What it is a way to, it's a way into a piece of software that allows you to use it more flexibly. So if you've ever seen the application QLab, which is for show control, you know, it has a user interface that is designed to let you accomplish common tasks very easily. But it also, behind the scenes, has an API, so that if you're trying to do something that is not easily accomplishable within the graphical user interface of, you know, Windows mouse pointer, that you can still do that. So you can access, an API gives you access to deeper parts of the program or of a piece of software, with the idea that probably you want to do something that is not a standard way to use that, or maybe hasn't been done before. The Steve Jobs once described APIs as effectively a way, if you imagine software as a building, APIs let you start at the 10th story instead of digging out the basement. And so that's, again, that idea with Cohort, that whether it's an idea you want to prototype quickly and see if it's any good, or if, where it could lead, or whether it's something that's, quite well thought out, that you don't have to start by, digging out a hole, digging out the foundation, and, finding a developer. You've heard me talk a little bit about our partners. It's probably worth to work with them. I've spent, I guess, 10 years now building software. And in my experience, it is possible to build decent software without a user, without build someone to do something that they want to do. In my experience, the closer the developer and the development team is to the user, the more valuable the software can become, and the more we all learn from each other. So our goal with the development model for Cohort was to work in series with partners, creative performing arts companies with sort of technical ambitions, first time, but to work with them and either give them a capability that they needed, or take something that they had built to be able to do something technically and make it more generally usable. So there's a part of this that kind of works in two directions. If you've already, as a company, worked with a developer or done something in software land, love to hear about it, so that maybe we can figure out if there are parts of that that can be valuable to others in the community. If you are starting out with an idea of, hey, this would be a neat way to do that, we want to make it really easy for you to try that out. I'm going to take a moment and pause talking, just in case there are hands up or questions or things that I'm not talking about that you would like me to get to.
Jacob, I have a question.
Great.
This
I'm not
is
sure
Brian.
who's speaking,
Hi.
but I'm happy. Okay, hi, Brian.
Hi. I'm wondering, do you know about Charter? Is that a familiar?
That is not, and I'm excited. What is Charter?
I just was curious, like if there was any relationship in terms of how this is either similar or dissimilar to it. I'll link it in the chat. But it's essentially like used for operating immersive experiences, usually through a phone. And so I have yet to use it, but I guess I was just curious if you had any relationship. But if not,
yeah. No, this is so exciting because so I've just scanned their website. We're talking about so many of the same things. The crossover between immersive theater and escape rooms, crossover between, commercial experiences and alternate reality games, and so no. And again, we're in a non-competitive mode, so we will go have a look at it and see what they're up to, and see how we can be in cooperation. Super exciting. So yes, please check that out, folks. Sorry, just taking a second. Okay. Question for which direction we go in next. Would we have an option to either look at some works, or I can do a bit of a demo of a particular piece staged this summer with Cohort. Or if somebody in the room has a project tickling their head, we can sort of talk about that as an exemplar, or as how you might use Cohort to get started or to test something out. I should have made this an official poll if I wanted real feedback. All right, I think we'll do a little demo. Demo would be awesome. Okay, so Cohort is built around queuing, and it's also built around filling in the gaps between systems. So what we're gonna demo first is something I built this summer for Outside the March for a new work in development called the Itinerary. And the Itinerary is a live stream only work, or sorry, it's a remote only work for 6 people, 6 audience members, 1 performer isolated in a room. Amanda, if you can share the Itinerary QR code, I'm going to ask you to do as participants is using the camera on your phone, scan this, and you should get taken to a website, which will have a few questions for you. Once we've had a chance to scan this and go to the website, I'll post the link in chat as well in case you need to manually type it in on your phone. Okay, so I've posted that there as well. Amanda, bring down the QR code if anybody hasn't quite managed it yet. The link is in chat. And I'm going to share my screen from this end so that you can see what I see. So as I go, I'm going to call out sort of some components, some of the individual tools within the Cohort toolkit. So what we are seeing here, what you are using on your screen, on your phones, is our web client. And so that allows a Cohort experience to be connected to or joined from a web browser, such as the one. What I'm using on my screen is our admin site, which allows me to run those events or occasions. In Cohort land, an event is essentially a production, the reproducible content of a show or an experience, and an occasion is like an individual performance. So that lets us, for example, if you're using push notifications app with Cohort, you want to make sure that these notifications to people who are attending, say, that night's experience. And so occasions are how we separate this. Kick and push. Rehearsal. Okay. So this is what of the Itinerary saw as she was running the show. The framework of the Itinerary was that it lasts 24 minutes. Each minute, the audiences make a choice about how the performer spends their time in the next minute. So I'm going to send out the first set of choices, and I'm going to ask Amy to make a choice. Chosen activity, wake up. I'm going to start the next turn. Now I'm going to ask Howard to make the next choice. And I can see here that he has chosen meditation. A few other things I'll point out. For the stage manager, we're still on turn 1, if we imagine this is a turn-based game. In the flow of the show, she can see, okay, we've got 30 seconds left until the turn changes. And the other thing I'll note is that, actually, let me do one. Evan, can you make the next choice? Oh, we got meditation again. There we go, exercise 1. All right. I'm going to pop back on Zoom just for a moment. No, okay. So the way that the show worked, we had essentially two channels between performer and audience, or between the production and the audience. We had the channel of Zoom, so that the audience, that's how the audience observe. And then we have this channel, which is how they interacted with the performance. And that was really interesting. A couple of the things out of that were, one, for a remote audience experience where they're watching on a laptop or a larger screen, giving their phones a job to do actually meant that their attention was much more with the show. So even just having something for them to do with phones meant that we see when people started goofing around on their phones, or started paying attention to other things, and we saw a lot less of that. Generally felt like we were more in a space together. I think part of that also, in addition to sort of the attentional mechanics of it, this gave us the ability to take what was designed as a highly participatory in-person intimate show, and put it into a remote only, and still have that level of high participation and interaction and decision making and agency. The last thing that I think is useful to see here, or interesting to see here, is under player submitted activities, these are what you each typed in when you filled in your little survey: sitting on grass, walking in the forest, what's an activity that gives you calm and contentment? And these come back at the end of the show. So at the very last turn, the person whose turn it is to select the action gets to pick from these player submitted activities. So again, it's a way to bring their participation and their interaction into the world of the show. It was that the stage manager was in the loop of that, and in that loop of submit and then broadcast out to everybody to choose from. So I'll know that the stage manager here can actually do some moderation. So she can, if she decides that making tea is just a horrendously inappropriate, not part of this piece, sorry, we don't like this, she has the ability to eliminate that from consideration right here. This concludes our short demo of the itinerary. Actually, if you stay on those, I'll do one more piece of demo, which was that when I work as a theatrical designer, it's very exciting for me when designers get to kind of bleed into each other's territory. I started as a project designer and did a fair bit of that, and I always really enjoyed working closely with lighting designers because we're speaking the same language. We're all using photons, but we have different ends and we have to cooperate. And so one thing we did here was that this interface is, can't see me now, can you? I think I stopped the share. I apologize for that. Hang on. Just finish this up. Okay, sorry, I think I'm back on sharing now. This interface here was customized from sort of a stock cohort interface because there was a lot going on for the stage manager. So we customized this so that, we could have some extra information displayed. We can also fire cues in Cohort from things like QLab. So I'm going to demo one other component that we've put together. Which is a small app that runs locally and allows us to bridge from Cohort to show control software or to lighting boards. So in this case, we want to try from OSC to Cohort. We're using Cohort, and I'm going to sign in here with the same credentials I used on our admin site. I'm just going to check one thing here, which is ID 14. So that's which occasion I'm sending this to. Okay, and for the people who are still on their phones and connected, I'm going to essentially mock a lighting cue. So our lighting designer asked, hey, is there a way that we can that we can control, the appearance of the phone? And I said, yes, of course we can. So this is an example of a cohort lighting cue getting sent from QLab. And in theory, you have seen your background on that website now turn rich. I can change that sort of in real time here. And we could do just as easily greenish. We can also fire sound cues and video cues. In the itinerary, we didn't use those. I'm going to stop this share now. One thing we've been with is the need to continually flow things. Can you push an image? Yes. Image, we have several cue types. Sound, light, image, text, haptic, which is vibration, and I'm forgetting one right now. Thank you. Oh, can I push an image right now from QLab? This is a great question. The current model for Cohort is that all of the content, whether it's sound files, video, images, are on the client side. So we're not streaming anything. We're not sending images from my computer to your phone. All we're doing is sending cues. Show that image that's already there. Play that video that's already included in the website. So that's one of the things that we're trying to bridge now in terms of making this really easy to pick up and use. I think probably we worked with Jordan Campbell in Toronto in the month previous, September, to see how easy we could make it for him to do a synchronized piece. So Jordan was doing a one-on-one show, socially distanced in a park, and wanted a shared soundtrack. And so one way to do that is with an RF transmitter and silent disco headphones. Cohort allows you to do that with phones, with mobile devices, as opposed to renting special hardware. Is the web client site on WebSocket connection? Yes, WebSockets are used. That's the overall communication strategy for Cohort, is WebSocket based. This is a technical question from Howard. There are a number of ways servers and phones can talk to each other. WebSockets is one of them. Howard, if you're curious, we went with WebSockets because it's a foundational technology and because it's firmly available across iOS apps, Android apps, websites. So yeah, we were aiming for to use essentially like low-level tools that were widely available across platforms. I'm thinking about what else we wanted to show and talk about. I think with 10 minutes left, I would actually like to do some more Q&A time. I think it's probably useful. I will mention is that our team has been talking about spending a fair bit of October running a closed beta, which for us would be a chance to do a reality, because we've been working with a lot of partners who already had works in mind. And so I think it feels like an important step to make sure that you can step into this tool and actually do something right away. Whether that's doing something like we did, where we build the ability for you to upload audio directly without going through one of our team members, or pulling down and figuring out how the pieces click together yourself. So I think if people are interested, say if someone, okay, we've got some excellent questions coming in. Sorry, I'm going to, Heidi is asking, what's the UX response for accessibility features? Heidi, do you want to come on voice and we can chat a little bit, because I want to be able to ask some follow-ups to that.
Yes.
Hi, Heidi.
I'm not in a very quiet. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm curious. When you say UX response for accessibility features, are you talking about general capabilities
Just
or our
your
experience?
experience, like what you mentioned that you were using it for some accessibility features for one of the projects, and I'm just wondering how it went and
Sure,
if
yeah.
that's something you'd recommend.
So the two things that were useful, I think, in that context were Cohort allows you, unlike something like a silent disco where everybody hears the same thing or one of three channels maybe, Cohort allows you to get as granular as you want about which cues fire for whom. And so with Adelheide's show Lot F, we segmented the audience. The audience was already segmented for the piece into 4 groups. So we reflected that in Cohort land. And the front of house checked in with folks to see if they would prefer closed captioning for sections of the piece where dancers were speaking and voicing text. That group received specific cues that other groups did not, which were text cues. And so I was standing by the outside of the crowd. It could have been a stage manager or an ASM as well. I had the admin site loaded on my phone, and as the dancers moved through the scripted text, I just hit the next cue to broadcast a set of closed captions to people's devices. So it was, it opened up options for accessibility and site-specific performance that are often not present, would be my answer to that. And I think, yeah, that's how I'd answer that question. Oh, and I should mention, since I should mention that we're spending, our team is spending a week in November at Theatre Passe Muraille in I think they're calling it 1111 is the program. They're running a series of labs around accessibility, and so we'll be spending some time in November working on are there ways to use Cohort to facilitate ASL interpretation, whether that's the ability to sort of make it something that can happen on stage or off stage, depending on the show or the night, whether that's a way to bridge between live and recorded ASL interpretation. So yeah, stay tuned, and if you want, let us know, and we'll keep you up to date on our coverage there. I actually am going to jump back, Adrian. Say if someone wants to use Cohort for a project, what's the first step? This is changing the fastest of all of the things we are currently working on, because we are now in the phase of, right, there has to be a first step other than email us. So I think the first step is actually to model what you want to do like draw a sketch of what you want to be able to do, or think about what you want to be able to do. Because there are many choices on both sides. So on one end is the audience experience. Generally with Cohort, that's going to involve a phone or a tablet. So if we assume that that's the case, then you have a choice between thinking about you're going to be in some way releasing something or building something, whether it's a website or an app. For each show, Cohort is built around the model that each show or each production is their own, the artifacts related to that show. So some things to think about. If you only want to, the first big choice is on the audience side, is it a website? I would characterize those two things as at opposite ends of a spectrum. A website is very quick to create, update, change at will, and is accessible, as we know, places. But the website will not allow you to do things like trigger vibrations, control the device flashlight, or do sort of high fidelity augmented reality. An app will do all of those, will allow you to do all of those things. So in theater terms, and not to be like patronizing, this is something that helped me organize my thoughts a bit. Releasing an app starts to feel a bit like working in a big union house. You have lots of capabilities, but you also have a lot more to do, and changes are going to be slower. So once you've thought about the audience experience, think about the backstage setup. Is it a site-specific show where, you know, your stage manager, if you're lucky to have one, would be using, you know, a phone to decide what happens next and run cues? Or are you in a situation where you're using something like QLab or Isadora already for other parts of the show, because we can talk to those, and so then, you know, cohort cues can be run from there. I think that kind of mental organization is probably at this point the best first step, because the next step still at this point, alas, is to shoot us an email.
Yeah, just a quick question about that. So what are the functions that you can operate from the simpler website version? Like, so you can fire video, you can fire sound, you can fire text?
Text, images, yeah. No
and
vibration. Sorry?
And like a video as well?
Yep. Although again,
bandwidth issue?
Bandwidth issues, but also yes, because if it have an app, the video lives in the app, so the person installs the app, and then there's no wait. If it's a web version for really tight synchronization, it's not going to be quite as tight on the web client.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. So if it's sort of high precision is demanded, probably eventually you're looking at an app, but it still might be useful to prototype the work using the web client. Okay. Because you can get up and running and quickly see, you know, is this good enough, or do we need more synchronization? Do we need, you know, tighter timing? Okay, so yeah, first step in October, I think our team is talking about running a closed beta. So our goal would be email us, and we will not only during that period, you know, help you get organized and you know, answer questions interactively, but we will also make sure that our experiences with you turn into tutorials and how-to guides and ways for other people, the next person along, to pick it up and not have to email us and be able to just try things out right away. Okay, I'm just scanning questions. Jordan had a great COVID question, but I do want to answer Brian's practicalities question, cost and suggested timeline. My team will tell you that suggested timelines are not a thing I am strong on. In a theatrical design team, I tend to really lean on stage managers and production managers to organize timelines. But I can tell you that Jordan Campbell's project was, I would say, like a almost minimal example of you know, a cohort-based project. It had one sound file, 2 people, 2 devices, and a go. After he reached out to us, I think it was about a day or 2 before they were testing in the park with some devices we lent them to test with. And he's written a blog entry about it for our blog, which we publish soon. So if you want to read more about that, you can. So it can be that quick if it's a very simple sort of limited, you know, minimal example. The itinerary, that as an example, used a lot of pre-existing code and feature, and then as an independent designer, I spent 2 weeks with the production, kind of customizing the interface for the stage manager and understanding, okay, what does this show need? So Adrian asks, is this something that the cohort team needs to program for a maker, or could makers work the system themselves? I think we're right in the middle of that hump, I would say. If you have somebody who can do like relatively basic level web development as part of the team, then yes, it can be done on your own. Right now, we're still not quite at the point of picking up and using without some developer involved, some computer savvy type person involved.
Also, just to add on to Jake,
Thanks, Amanda.
just so people know, as we continue moving through the current phase we're in with Cohort, there is going to be a lot of documentation up on the website, and that's going to have also like step-by-steps and the lines of code that you would need to be able to use it. So it's going to be very, very straightforward for people of all technical backgrounds and experience levels, so that the goal is that it will be fairly self-sufficient. And it might only be an email in terms of, I'm hitting a roadblock and I need a little bit of assistance. But otherwise, the goal is the documentation will be expansive enough that people can do it themselves.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm so happy you jumped in. To expand on, or just to gloss Amanda's answer, by Christmas, we are aiming to have this be usable by makers themselves without us being involved as programmers. Or technicians. So that's kind of why we're thinking about October as a chance to test that. Duncan follows up about the cost. Currently for until Christmas, our team activities are funded by the Canada Council through the Digital Strategy Fund. Our limit, the one restriction there is that we have a bit of a wall with that funding. We can't do design work on specific shows. Digital strategy funding cannot be used to make art. It can be used to help artists make things. And so we are just observing that slight, so in terms of open beta, it will be sort of a situation where people are saying, hey, I'd love to do this. And we say, okay, I'm going to help you do that and figure out how to do that. And we're going to write it down for the next person.
So if I've got an installation that I'm planning to do with my students in December, is this realistic? Like
again, depending
if I
on
want to push some audio to some phones, for instance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, it is.
Cool.
So in terms of the cost, the actual tools are free to use. We have subsidized sort of support time and working time until about the end of this year, and then possibly a little bit more. And cost-wise, I think it probably at that point comes down to, Brian, you were saying you're on the production side. You're probably looking at something that can be done by a technician who can handle, relatively simple computers and networking type stuff. So you're probably looking at a bit of an hourly cost just for, technical operations or involvement. But again, that should be doable within a theatrical cost structure. So hopefully that's a bit of an answer that's useful.
Cool.
I will mention for people that it is 3 o'clock, 3:05. And so we are on Zoom, super happy to stick around. I know there's a keynote happening and other stuff going on. So if you'd like to stick around for a bit, hear more, ask questions, converse, I'm here, I'll stick around. And otherwise, we thank you so much for coming. We will make sure that we let the folks in this room know about the open beta or the closed beta and how you can be a part of it. We would love for you to join us and bring some ideas that we can help you realize or try out. I'll say a thank you now because I didn't earlier to my colleagues Amanda Baker, who's beside me in Zoom, probably not for you, and Nabil Kassam keeps us on the rails. Okay, people who wanted to go had a chance to go. Anybody sticking around, feel free to come on, post or ask questions.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I wondered about the possibilities for live captioning for site-specific work. My work is rooted in access and inclusion, and I'm seeing some also crossover with live audio description possibilities, live AD to people's phones, and if they're blind or partially sighted. Have you experienced that yet in your work?
Other than some closed captioning, no. I think we've done one, or when I say we, sorry, in my personal practice, not my cohort role, I've tried it out for translation, but not for described audio. But in general, again, like the opportunity to have that be cued from within the show, so that it can be, you know, somebody who's in the flow of the temporal flow of the show and in the backstage gang who can be actually supporting that kind of accessibility, feels really useful. And that's been a common mention, that there are commercial platforms and there are platforms for closed captioning and for audio description. So in those specific places, I would see us at a simple, cheap thing that you could try and know if it's enough, or if you want to, if you want a more tool.
Right.
So yeah, we would be definitely interested to experiment with that and support that.
Awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, now that we can't do it live this year in person, this could be something we explore for virtual performances. So I might reach out to you guys about that.
And the ability also just to have a separate channel where like you have the ability to interact with audience members, either in a structured or unstructured way. But like a couple of shows now that I've been a part of have had a component where, you know, they effectively text the audience members. And even just that is such a simple interaction, but really opens up front of house possibilities and really opens up possibilities within an experience.
That is so cool. Yeah. Yeah, no, you guys blow my mind. Like this is, throwing open so many cool possibilities. So thank you for sharing. Cool. I'm gonna head to the camp, but thanks again.
Awesome.
Bye.
We'll see you there.
Yeah, Jacob, I just want to jump in. I mean, the thing that I find really cool about this is the idea that it could be just a website from the client end, because everything else I've looked at, it's got to get an app, blah, blah, blah. So this is really cool. And I've got a couple projects in mind that this maybe apply to. I do a lot of stuff with translation, where we do French English, and we've had, you know, in circles and embedding it and whatever, and everybody hates it and, you know, like it, blah, blah, blah. So if we could push the translation to a phone, you know, that would be great. And I've got an installation project I'm doing with my students at Glendon. We're basically trying to do theater. So we're going to build an installation inside a theater that one whole wall is glass that the audience can actually drive by or walk by. And we're going to use some triggers and some Arduinos and you know, like some video. And one of the things was actually to push audio. And I was actually talking to the radio station at the school. But this might actually be a cooler way to do it, because not a lot of students have radios. They don't have phones, though.
Right. Actually, so two interesting things there. One, that kind of like gluing things together situation is a very, like, that is where this grew out of to some extent. Like there have definitely been shows where Cohorts provided the spine, like the foundational clothesline that everything else gets hung on.
Yeah.
But a lot more of the times as a piece. And so, a thread of our development has been about trying to make it the most useful piece that it can be in those sorts of, you know, we've got Isadora running a bunch of stuff and, you know, so that feels interesting. And if people are driving by, you know, Android phones actually have FM transceivers in them.
I just, you got to get people to turn them on and use them and do and blah, blah, blah. Whereas a website, one can, especially if you QR code the thing, it's just a website. I mean, that's, no, this, and so most of your stuff then is using like OSC as the bridge, like you're based.
Actually, OSC is really, like, OSC is kind of how we tier.
Okay, right.
Because we're trying to, you know, bridge together cloud, theater, device, server, all that kind of stuff. So, so we're using, outside of theater tech, we're using WebKits, as somebody mentioned, which are more of a, like, device to server connection, or, you know, server to many devices connection.
Right.
But yeah, OSC is what we're using
So that's the thing is, and I'm sorry if I'm taking up people's time or if anybody wants to jump in.
I think we are almost alone, so that's totally fine.
All right, because yeah, I'm a theater background, so I'm Isadora, QLab, OSC, all that stuff is my world. The WebSocket thing is where I go, oh, I've heard of websites, but I've never made any.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking, like, to your point about if you've got I've got a lot of contacts and friends at the university, in the web department. So if I get somebody to essentially build a website that's got some cues nested inside, is that really all it kind of takes? And then we essentially just push triggers to it? Is that it's like a dummy version?
Yes. There's a little module that you can put in a light that will basically go, hey, lighting Q1, hey, sound Q3, go. And the developers just attach, those cues to specific media assets.
Right.
The media files, and then to figure out what the audience experience needs to be, because that's very freeform, right?
That's pretty cool, man.
Some experiences they don't need to see at all. It's like, no, it's just a blank screen, but sound plays when it should.
Great. Okay.
So yeah, cool. Thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
And say hi to Dominique if you speak to her before I do.
Yeah. Okay. Will do. All right, man.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Ciao.
Ha 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 ha!